إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. اليوم يمكن يكون آخر أيام رجب 29 أو ربما غدا، والله أعلم. كثير يعني بعض البلاد أثبتت أن غدا أول شعبان وبعضها لم يثبت بعض. فنبدأ إن شاء الله في شهر شعبان أحكام فقه الصيام. نتابع القراءة شيء من الأدب المفرد حتى يستفيد الواحد من سنة الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم في الآداب، ولكن نركز أكثر على فقه الصيام. We're talking that today is the 29th of the month of Rajab, and some of the Islamic countries have already confirmed tomorrow is the beginning of Sha'ban, and that's 1 month before Ramadan, and some are still waiting to confirm it. So during the month of Sha'ban, we're going to be talking about the legislations and the details about fasting and matters related to it. But we're still going to be reading some of the etiquettes and the manners from the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, from the book of Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah. باب صلة الرحم تزيد في العمر. حدثنا عبد الله بن صالح قال حدثني الليث قال حدثني عقيل عن ابن شهاب قال أخبرني أنس بن مالك أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من أحب أن يبسط له في رزقه وينسأ له في أثره فليصل رحمه. ينسأ أي يؤخر. This is the chapter about how keeping the ties of the kinship leads somebody to have longer life. We know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He created everybody, that on the 40th day, the angel will come and will put the spirit, the soul in that living baby, and in it will be decreed how long this person will live, what kind of sustenance he's going to get. Is he going to end up being a good person, happy person, end up in Jannah, or a miserable person getting in hellfire? So life is determined, but the length of it, Allah determines it knowing what kind of person this person will be. So those who keep the ties of the kinship are usually the ones who have longer life. That's one of the reasons Allah will extend the life. And since only Allah knows that, we don't know how long we're living. And you'll find that people that have good ties with their families, they live longer. A lot of studies have told you the social isolation is one of the reasons why people don't live that long. And they tell you usually when a man loses his wife, he doesn't last long after her for the elderly. On the other hand, when a woman loses her husband, she lives fine after he's dead. Part of it, I mean, there's a lot of biological reason for it, but part of it socially, the women have a better social network than men. Men usually have it limited, and when they're old, a lot of people they know already are dead. The wife usually arranges all the meetings with their friends and families and so on. If she's not in the picture, it's going to be very isolated. Isolation is like a disease of the elderly and causes a lot of death. So this is medicine apart, sunnah, that keeping the ties of the kinship is one of the reasons that one life will be longer. This hadith, Anas ibn Malik. Anas ibn Malik, as a lot of you remember, he was a servant of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He came from a poor family from Al-Ansar, people of Medina. And it was very common for the young ones to go and serve in the house of people who have more means, more influential. It will take some of the burden on the family to feed that person. And at the same time, they learn from the manners. And Anas ibn Malik, he was a youngster. And he served Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam between 9 to 10 years in his life in Medina. He learned a lot. And he made dua for Anas ibn Malik that he will prosper and have a long life and a lot of offsprings. He was one of the last Sahaba to die after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He died at the times of Al-Hajjaj, so he outlived all Khulafa al-Rashideen, Muawiyah and his son, and so on, 4 or 5 of the Khulafa. He outlived all of them. And he spread a lot of knowledge, so a lot of hadith are narrated by Anas ibn Malik, and this is one of it, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, whoever loves that Allah will give him a lot of sustenance and will make his life longer, he should keep the ties of the kinship. وحدثنا إبراهيم بن المنذر حدثنا محمد بن معن قال حدثني أبي عن سعيد بن أبي سعيد المقبري عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول من سره أن يبسط له في رزقه وأن ينسأ له في أثره فليصل رحمه. This is another hadith, same wording, narrated by the different Sahabi. So that means this is something Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has taught a lot of the Sahaba on multiple occasions. So it was a common knowledge. It's not something that only one Sahabi knew about it. That keeping the ties of the kinship is a reason for somebody to prosper and to live a long and happy life. So inshallah we'll stop here. I'm going to start reading from Fiqh al-Siyam. When it comes to matters of fiqh, fiqh in Arabic means understanding, basically. Faqih al-shay, to understand something. And it became as a way of knowing the details of legislation in Islam. So the ulama have put it in a way, they say aqidah was something you tie your heart on. That is something you deeply believe in. So these are the tenets of faith. And then you have fiqh are the details of legislation, what is allowed, what is not allowed, and so on. And then you have akhlaq, like what read the manners, what Adab Mufrad saying. And then al-mu'amalat, dealing with people, a lot of it will fall under fiqh. And Rasulullah ﷺ has encouraged people to understand the legislation, not just only the general belief. الناس كالمعادن خيارهم في الجاهلية خيارهم في الإسلام إذا فقهوا أو فقهوا. He said people of material or quality. The best of them in Islam are the best of them in Jahiliyyah. So they had that quality. If they have the fiqh, the understanding, the knowing what they should do and what they shouldn't do. And that's what you find. You find a lot of people, they were good before they became Muslims. When they became Muslims, they even became better. There's character. There's certain people that know details of Islam, but they don't have that core of purity and being a good person. So unfortunately, these people turn out to be extremists. So they will be reading Quran, they'll be praying, they'll be fasting, and so on. But once they know something, this is haram, or he's doing something haram, he's a kafir. This one is doing something without, he's mubtada, he's fasiq. They started judging people rather than working on themselves. They start just looking at the fault of others. So when we look at the fiqh, how would we know what are the details we need to follow? We know we have to follow the orders of Rasulullah, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as in the Quran, the way of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his sunnah, in the books of the hadith. But it should be, the intention is knowing what Allah wants. The schools of fiqh that we have nowadays, Maliki, Hanafi, Shafi, and Hanbali, the fourth ones, are ways to make us understand, but they're not an obligation. That is, there is no part of Quran it tells you, oh, you have to be Hanafi, or you have to be Maliki, you have to be Shafi, or Hanbali. No part of Quran, no part of the Sunnah. But these are ways to make it easier. So these are an explanation, but not an obligation. Saying that, they are respected. They're people who their intention was to follow the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and in small details, minor details, they might differ. They have what we call ijtihad. Ijtihad, when they make their own deduction, they gather the evidence, and they reach a conclusion. These deductions and conclusions might differ for reasons. One of it, the evidence might be different for each one of them. These ulama, they lived, most of them, in the second Hijri century. So they had like 100 years or so between them and the Prophet ﷺ. So they had 2, 3, or sometimes more intermediary teachers teaching them the Sunnah of Rasulullah ﷺ. They lived geographically a little bit different areas. So a certain hadith might reach one of them, might not reach the other one, or might reach him in a chain of narration that's not trustworthy for a person, so he considered it a weak narration. Another scholar might get the same text, but through more reliable text of chain of narration, and will accept it. So that's why they should be respected, but they're not worshipped. The worship to Allah, the following for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Anybody else other than that, their saying has to be based on evidence. And we say the sources of legislation, we mentioned it before, Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, they follow Quran and Sunnah, and Ijma' al-Ummah, whatever the scholars have consensus with. What the Sahaba, their opinion is superior to opinion and anybody that comes after them. And then the prominent ulama, the Jumhur, most of them, they don't agree on something that is wrong. And you try to stay away from people who have odd ideas that's totally different from everybody else. Once you see somebody alim, because there's no alim 100% all his opinions are correct. He might have something that is different from the rest. You say, okay, he came with something, he believes it is right, he's trying his best, but all other ulama disagree with him, we're not going to follow. So when you're going to be reading the fiqh, you can either start with the fiqh of one madhab. If you're living in a city, they have only follow Maliki madhab, you're going to start with the Maliki madhab. If you're living, let's say, in India and Pakistan, you're probably going to be studying Hanafi madhab. If you're living in Egypt or Syria, Shafi'i madhab is very prominent. There are areas where they study Hanbali madhab or so on. Saudi Arabia, most of them Hanbali madhab and so on. You can start from that point. For us being international community, most of us come from different background. The best way really to follow al-fiqh al-muqaran. Fiqh al-muqaran is comparative fiqh. That is every idea, every detail of legislation is based on the evidence itself. So one legislation, one fiqh might, you find it in 2 or 3 madhab and one madhab not with it and so on. So instead of saying, oh, according to Maliki, you do this, we say, what is the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? When in disagreement, what the ulama have reached a deduction with. The books that followed this, all the ulama, that was their intention in their books. So when Imam Malik had his Muwatta Imam Malik, he gathered the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In his time, living in Medina, a lot of the sons of the Sahaba were still there, and their students are still there. He gathered their ilm and put it in that book. And he made a lot of his conclusions and his fiqh depending on it. Imam Ahmad, the same thing when he gathered his book, Musnad al-Imam Ahmad. And then when you find their students disagreeing with their teacher, like Imam Abu Hanifa, he has 2 prominent students, Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad. They tell you 1/3 of the madhab, they disagreed with their teacher. Reason, now they expand in their knowledge. They started interacting with other ulama, they have more hadith and so on. And the same thing we find with the Imam Shafi'i, has an old madhab and a new madhab. Old madhab, when he was living in Iraq, he had certain resources, he made his own deduction according to it. When there was persecution for Ahlul Sunnah in Iraq at that time, for the matter of whether Quran was the words of Allah who created, a lot of ulama were persecuted, so he fled to Egypt. And in Egypt, now he started interacting with more ulama. They have more of the Maliki madhab, a lot of the ahadith, and then there is al-madhab al-jadid, Imam al-Shafi'i. And they would say, in his old saying, he said this, in new saying, he said that. Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, his madhab was evolving according to the knowledge he gains. They tell you Imam Ahmad, in this matter, he has 2 sayings, sometimes 3 sayings. They said one time it is permissible, one time it's not permissible, or it's put conditions and so on, depending on the evidence. And a lot of them did not want their students to write their fiqh, their conclusion. They want to write the evidence, but not the conclusion. See, we're human beings. We say something according to what we have right now. Another year, we might have different evidence, say something else. We shouldn't compel anybody to stick with our opinion. This is our opinion. When Imam Malik, after he got his Muwatta, people were so impressed with it. Abu Ja'far al-Mansur, he was the Abbasi Khalifa, he wanted to force everybody to follow it. He said, no, I don't want people to be forced to it. There's other ulama that I'm not the only one who has ilm. Even these 4 ulama, they're not the only ones. Sufyan ibn Uyayna, Imam al-Thawri, Imam al-Awza'i, al-Layth, and so on. There was like 4 or 5 other ulama at their time were considered at the same level of knowledge and deduction and so on. But their students did not keep up their teachings and message the same way the students of the 4 prominent ulama. So when we come nowadays, we're going to be learning this fiqh. The contemporaries that close to our generation, Imam al-Shawkani from Yemen, he started gathering books of fiqh according to the evidence and started spreading it. One of his students, Imam Sayyid Sabiq in Egypt, he had a book, Fiqh al-Sunnah. In it, he tried to compile the details of the fiqh according to the dalil rather than according to one madhab. And then after that, Imam al-Albani, being a more scholar of hadith, started a project where he looked at fiqh al-Sunnah. He started kind of purify the hadith in it. So what they found then it's hard to keep up with it because a lot of the hadith and books of fiqh are either weak or have no evidence in it and so on. So he wanted to start his own book, الثمر المستطاب من فقه السنة والكتاب. But he died before he finished that project. So one of his students, Hussein bin Awd al-Awaisha, he wrote a book that I really think everybody should have it as an introduction to فقه الموسوعة الفقهية الميسرة في فقه الكتاب والسنة المطهرة. It's like an abridged encyclopedia about the fiqh in Islam from the book of Allah and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he put it in matters of starting with the salah, the tahara, purifying yourself, prayer, then fasting, then zakat, then hajj, and other details. And in it, he puts the evidence as to the best of his ability. And a lot of the fiqh in it, he learned it from his teacher, Imam al-Albani. And he said, وَقَالَ شَيْخُنَا. So he refers a lot to these matters. So I love that approach, and I said it cannot be 100% correct, but this is as close that I could find to something that relates back to the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yes,
are there any qawaid and usul that the ulama that don't follow a specific madhab have that can kind of like rival the qawaid and usul that the madhabs have, as opposed to just having dalil without qawaid and usul?
So there is a science, ilm usul al-fiqh. The problem with that ilm usul al-fiqh is more philosophy and logic. A lot of ulama did not like that approach, where you're making your logic a judge on the evidence. It is the science that help to tell you how to reach a conclusion. It's not to tell you whether this hadith is sahih or da'if, but once you have a hadith, how are you going to reach a conclusion about it? And then there is another ilm, qawaid al-fiqhiyya. Qawaid al-fiqhiyya is more like general rules. So let's give you an example of it. Jaf ala jaf, tahir la khilaf. So they say if two things are dry, if they come together, they're still pure. So if there was something that was impure at a time, let's say feces, and got very dry, and touch something else, a piece of wood that's dry, so they're still pure. So, but there's no hadith about it. This is what the ulama have reached a conclusion. These qawa'id fiqhiyah, sometimes they're generally accepted, sometimes they're not. You'll find the approach of Ahlul Hadith, Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, they try to minimize the logic, that using the brain to judge the text, but they have rules. So especially when you have evidence. The rules are, anytime there's an order, that means it's a must to be done. Unless you have a rule telling you it is not a must, it's preferred. So any order in the Quran and order in the Sunnah, whether to do or not to do, this is wajib. Unless there is a dalil, bring it from wajib to mustahab or makruh to other things. So that's one of the rules. When you have two texts that are conflicting, you don't choose which text to follow, you combine the two texts to the best of your ability. Like, we will give you an example. Rasulullah ﷺ said one should not show his thigh. So this is an order, showing the thigh is prohibited. But he himself was seen sitting with his thigh showing. Abu Bakr entered, he stayed the same way. Umar entered, stayed the same way. Then Uthman entered, and he covered his thigh and knee. And they told him, why do you do that? Say, I feel shy from a person, Uthman, that the angels feel shy from him. He's such a shy person. So here the ulama tells you, well, that means that order was for, it is highly encouraged to cover the knee, but it is not haram to uncover it outside salah. So this is the conclusion they reach. Sometimes when Rasulullah ﷺ orders something or prohibits something, then he does the opposite. There are possibilities for that. One of it, the order or prohibition came first, then came a legislation canceling that. As we know that initially it was the order, anytime you eat something that's barbecued, touched by fire, after you eat it, you're supposed to make wudu. But then came a hadith, Rasulullah said, I ordered you first to do that, then I'm telling you, you don't have to. So there was a clear timeline. First was an order to make wudu, anything touched by fire. Then came the order, no, you don't have to. So you know that. But sometimes you can't tell. So you don't know which one came first. In this case, once you cannot really, and one will be am and one is khas. One is general, one is specific. Like you have in Quran, حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَيْتَةِ. Anything that is dead, that means animal-wise, is haram for you. But then you have a hadith, أُحِلَّتْ لَنَا مَيْتَتَانِ وَدَمَانِ السَّمَكْ وَالْجَرَادِ. That there are two kinds of dead animals we're allowed to eat, fish and the locusts, the grasshoppers. Because this is how people, you throw your net at night, you come next day, pick it up, the fish is dead. If it was a land animal, you have a trap, you come next day, the animal's dead, you're not allowed to eat it. If you have a snare, you have a trap, you have something, the animal got trapped, the next day you find it dead, you're not allowed to eat it. But fish, you're allowed. Why? The Quran tells you mayta is haram. This is the general text. The hadith made it specific, all haram except for these two kinds. So this is what you try as much as possible, you don't cancel the two texts. When there is confliction, then there are rules they follow. When you couldn't combine it, you couldn't find any way of combining it, you take safety. Anything, the general rule, anything in dunya is allowed. So any kind of food, any kind of drink is allowed, unless you have a specific reason why it is not allowed. الأصل في الأمور في الدنيا الحل فلا بد من دليل التحريم. So this الأصل في الدين أمور العبادة المنع إلا بدليل الجواز. The opposite is for religious matters. Religious matter, you don't do any kind of act of worship unless there is a text telling you allowed to do it. So people will not invent their own religion, their own worships. Somebody want to add a sixth salah, want somebody add a new prayer, say, call it jumping in place or doing push-ups and say Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, do whatever. So nobody will invent his own way. In dunya, the rules are everything is allowed unless you have a text that tells you it is not allowed. And when you have two ahadith, let's say, one tell you this is permissible, one tell you this is not permissible, the one that changes the matter from the origin to a new one take precedence. So if you come one hadith tell you mangoes are halal, well, mangoes are halal. We don't have any text that otherwise. If you get, there isn't, so just make it clear, there isn't. But if you get a text tell you mangoes are haram, and you're not sure which one to follow, the one that's haram you follow, because it changes a situation that was considered halal, then it came and changed it later on. And we might come into these details, so there are certain details about how you deal with this conflict. And this is what you're going to be seeing. Some of the ulama follow what they call amal al-sahaba. They say, okay, yeah, there is a hadith telling us this, but we don't find the sahaba following that hadith. So maybe it's not the meaning that we know of. I'll give you the example of growing the beard. The origin of the beard, it's a matter of dunya. You do whatever you want with your beard. But then there is a text from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam where he said, this is min sunan al-fitra, إعفاء اللحى وحف الشوارب, that it is a sunnah, a way of common sense, of instinct, that a man should grow his beard and trim his mustache. Saying it's sunnah al-fitra make it higher than regular sunnah. That means it should be any common sense man should follow it. And then you have so many of these ahadith, it almost reached the level of tawatur, that the numerous number of it make it a must, you have to grow your beard. So now all the ulama agreeing growing the beard is the sunnah of Rasulullah, that's sunnah wajib, not sunnah mustahab, wajib, higher than like. You have to do it. So what length do you keep it? So once you grow it, say you leave it, that means you shouldn't touch it at all. And that's what the Hanbali madhab go with. However, we have Sahaba who narrated that hadith, like Ibn Umar and Abu Huraira, and I think 2 or 3 other Sahaba mentioned from them. Every time their beard was longer than a handful, they cut it. They didn't refer it to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They didn't say we were ordered to do that. But they're the one who narrated the first hadith, so they know the order. They're the one who saw Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they're very sticklers to the rules. They're trying to follow the sunnah as much. And there's no report of any Sahabi that we know of that his beard is longer than a handful. We know they tell you it's big. Umar was described as a big beard. What is a big beard? I didn't know that until I've seen the people in Arabia. If you grow up not touching your beard, never trimmed your beard at all, it's going to be a short beard. It will never grow up to be a big beard. The only way it becomes a big beard, if you shaved it multiple times, then you grow it, it becomes big. I grew up, I didn't know that sunnah. So I was shaving my beard until I was, 23, 24. So when I grow it, it can grow really big. But if you grew up following the sunnah, you have a lot of the ulama of Saudi Arabia, you find they have little hair. I say, where's the sunnah? They follow the sunnah. They never shaved their beard since they were teenagers. So it never grew up to be full bushy beard. So for somebody having a beard like me, comparing it with somebody never touched a beard, have it thin and say, oh, this is a big bushy beard. So maybe what that means. So that's where the ulama, you'll find like Imam al-Albani say, it is a wajib that you don't let your beard grow more than a handful. But you have ulama, like Ibn Baz and Ibn Uthaymin saying, you shouldn't touch your beard. As long as grow, you let it grow. And then when you're reading like Ibn al-Jawzi, he had a whole book about the funny and foolish and people who make silly mistakes. He described anybody with a beard longer than a fistful, that is somebody's foolish. Hamqa muwaffalin. They say, they have a saying, every time this grows, It will make the roots dry, the brain gets dry if you let it go too long. So that tells you, if you follow this logic, you have to grow your beard. You shouldn't make it longer than a fistful. Shorter, there's disagreement, how short it is. And that's why you find some ulama, their beard is thin. And you wouldn't find any alim following the sunnah having no beard. You don't see that. You find even muqra'in, when they recite the Quran, a lot of people criticize Sheikh Abdul Basit, rahimahullah. He didn't have a beard. I tell you, Al-Husari, he had a beard. But some of the new ones, because they were reciters of the Quran, they were not fuqaha themselves. So they thought there's nothing wrong with shaving the beard. But the ones who follow it, so here you're applying the rules of Sunnah, and we can see where it applies and where the difference happened and when the ijtihad is. So they tell you, the ulama, if somebody is shaving his beard to imitate women, this is haram. Shaving his beard to imitate the non-Muslims, this is haram. Shaving his beard or his mustache in a way that imitates non-Muslims, then this is haram. When Rasulullah ﷺ, we've seen the ambassadors of the king of Persia coming, they have beard that shaved, mustache are so big, bushy, and covering their lips. You say, what is this? They said, our Lord ordered us to do that, their king. He said, my Lord, Allah, ordered me to trim the mustache and grow the beard. So now we know where we need to stand on it. But then, how long, how tall is? My understanding of the hadith, you should keep it around a handful. Anytime grow more than a handful, you trim it. Cutting the hair from the face is not allowed for men or women. So women to pluck their eyebrows, make them thinner and prettier, arch, whatever the new thing going on, then it's not allowed. If it's not allowed for women, it's not allowed for men. Cutting the hair beyond the face, so if the beard is longer coming to the neck, there's nothing wrong with it because it's not the face. And so on. So if you're applying these rules. So now we're talking the general fiqh, we're going to be, inshallah, talking about fiqh al-siyam, to understand when we're in disagreement, how the approach to that disagreement and how we can reach the closest. And when we say, okay, I disagree with this person, but I don't think he's mubtada'. He's following a sunnah, this is his ijtihad.
في ناس يأكلوا لحم ني ما يجنس ما في حديث يقول أحلت لكم الدمان.
نعم الدمان الكبد والطحال. نعم هذه لأن تشبه الدم وإن كانت ليست دم، فيها دم كثير أكثر من اللحم. اللحم الني ما في شيء يمنعه إلا إذا كان فيه ضرر. إذا ضرر ما يجوز الإنسان ضرر، لا ضرر ولا ضرار. But saying about when we mentioned that dead animals are prohibited, blood is prohibited except for two kinds, liver and spleen. Although technically liver and spleen are not blood, but they look like clots. And they have more blood in them than other tissues, but they are permissible. So he was asking about people eating raw meat without cooking it. There's no prohibition as long as it's not harmful. If there's disease in it, like we know a lot in our countries, in the Middle East, there is brucellosis in this meat. If you don't cook it well, you get sick. You shouldn't be eating raw meat. The same thing for raw milk. If you don't boil the milk well, you're very likely to get sick. So you need to boil it. So for health reasons, you do it. And in the rules of Islam, anything that brings harm to you or to others is prohibited. لا ضرر ولا ضرار. We're not going to talking about the level of fasting, how important it is, what kind of reward you get to it, and so on, because this, inshallah, in Khutab al-Jum'ah and so on, it will be covered. We're going to be talking more about the details, the fiqh in this matter. So if somebody says, what is hukm as-siyam? In any matter related to deen or dunya, there are 5 rules. Must do, wajib, must not do, haram. Encouraged to do, mustahab, encouraged not to do, makruh, or mubah, jaiz or mubah, is permissible, it's up to you to do it or not. Must do, wajib, you get rewarded if you do it, you get punished if you don't. Must not do, you get rewarded for staying away from it, you get punished if you do. Mustahab, encouraged, you get rewarded if you do it, but you don't get punished if you don't. So it is encouraged, let's say, to fast Monday and Thursday. You get rewarded if you do that. But if you decide not to, there's no punishment for not doing it. Makruh is something you get rewarded if you stay away from it, but you don't get punished for doing it. And mubah, there's no reward or punishment. It's up to you. You like apples, you like oranges, you like whatever you like, this matters. You like your colors, blue, green, gray. This is all matters that are mubah. Most worldly things are in that category unless there is a specific text for it. So siyam, there are rules for the siyam. There's siyam wajib, there's siyam mustahab, and there's siyam muharram. Is prohibited. And we're going to be talking about it. Ramadan is wajib. This is rukn min arkan al-Islam. Is considered ma'loom min ad-din bil-darura. You hardly see any Muslim that doesn't know fasting in Ramadan is not a wajib. So this is one of the highest level of fard. بما يثبت الشهر. يثبت شهر رمضان برؤية الهلال من واحد العدل أو بإكمال عدة شعبان 30 يوما. عن ابن عمر رضي الله عنهما قال: تراءى الناس الهلال فأخبرت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أني رأيته فصام وأمر الناس بصيامه. وعن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: صوموا لرؤيته وأفطروا لرؤيته فإن غبي أو غمي عليكم فأكملوا عدة شعبان 30. So how do you know that the month of Sha'ban starts? The Islamic month or lunar month. When you see the new moon, the month starts. How many people you need to see the new moon? One trustworthy person. He knows what he's doing, he's not a liar. If he said that, that's enough. Ibn Umar, he was a youngster at the time of Rasulullah. He was a teenager. People were trying to see the moon, they couldn't. He was in a spot, was clear, he saw the moon. He told Rasulullah ﷺ, he ordered everybody they should fast. Tomorrow, because you look at the night, the day starts from after sunset. So the first day of Ramadan, you start when you see the moon the night before. So when he saw the moon, they say tomorrow is first day of Ramadan, you're going to be fasting. They start praying Taraweeh that night. So in the Islamic calendar, the night comes first, and the day follows. When sunset, this is a new day. So one person is enough to confirm the beginning of the month. The same rule applies at the end with some ijtihad of some ulama. Some ulama say beginning of the month, one is enough. End of the month, you need 2 more. Say just in case somebody was feeling thirsty and hungry and they want to get it rid of, and he's not sure he saw it or not, and he's pushing the envelope. Maybe I saw it. You need 2 people. But there's no hadith in that matter. Yes. I remember once, there was somebody, he used to give khutbah in the old 4th Street Masjid, that he loves to do science and bumblebees and stuff like this. And he wanted to argue about that we shouldn't be looking at the moon, that all the astronomical calculations are enough. I said, you know this story, they told you that once a man was looking at the moon, nobody's seeing it. And it was, he had gray hair, one of it in front of his eye. I said, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, you move your eye, it moves with you. It's not like going to be stuck in one area. But he hears the story, and he's using that story that has no foundation to cancel the whole sunnah of Rasulullah ﷺ that he didn't look at the moon. So you see it, you start. Now, there are some rules that our people are following. The calculation can tell you the likelihood of a moon being seen. It's very complicated, seeing the moon, because they can calculate exactly when the shadow of Earth falls on the moon. Because if you're thinking about, this is the sun, Earth, and moon, at some point the shadow of Earth is going to cover the moon. This is when, end of the month, full darkness. At some point, there will be, the shadow will move and the moon will be born. It's going to be very thin. So at what level, and this need to happen with the new day starting, that means after sunset. So after sunset, you need the new moon to be old enough that you can see it. And that's where the disagreement comes on. There's no exact scientific calculation on how many hours you need the moon to be old to be seen. Most of the people who looked into it, they tell you, oh, if you're doing 22 to 24 hours, everybody will see it. It's old enough to see it. If it's less than 5 hours, nobody's going to be seeing it. Not with a telescope, nothing's too small. What do you do with the 10 and 15 hours? This will tell you maybe and maybe not. And that's where you're going to feed it different. It's going to depend on the location of Earth. As the Earth is rotating and the shadow coming, as it goes west, the moon will be older and older. So you might find areas, let's say in Indonesia, they haven't seen it, but they might see it in Arabia. If they didn't see it in Arabia, they might see it in Africa, or they might see it in East Coast or West Coast. So the age of the moon is not consistent throughout Earth. So this is science-wise, Islamically, what it should be. If Muslims are one country, one man seeing it is enough for everybody. So if you have a big country, let's say Turkey, it's wide enough country. So if they see it far east, far west, everybody should be fasting. Different countries, and logically, I mean, I remember one time when Yemen was North Yemen and South Yemen, and it's almost the same situation now, without officially calling it this way. You'll find North Yemen will decide we've seen the moon, and South Yemen say we didn't. It's like, makes no sense. It's like seeing Indiana saw the moon and Kentucky did not see the moon. Well, I mean, once one saw it, the other should be following with it. So the ulama, what they said, to get rid of this agreement, we're going to come to the ahadith. يوم صومكم يوم يصوم الناس ويوم فطركم يوم يفطر الناس. To get rid of this disagreement, the day you fast, when everybody's fasting, the day you break your fast, everybody breaks their fast. That means right or wrong, as long as the whole group of people are going to fast on that day, you fast with them. So if they got it wrong, they missed the day, they done it a day earlier, day later, you don't have to bother with it. If you are the one making that decision, you're going to follow the seeing to the best of your ability. If we are a common person, we're not making that decision, in the locality that you live in, your country, your city, whatever locality, you're going to be praying with them. Whenever they decide this is Ramadan, you're going to do it with them. The ulama said, how about if you saw it, you told the judge, you told the ruler, and they refused your witness. You say, we don't know you, we don't trust you, we're not going to take your word for it. We had people experience doing it for years, they looked, didn't see it. You see, in this case, he will fast on his own, but will not declare it in public, so it would not create chaos and public discourse. So in this case, he will keep it to himself. He will still be committed because he's ordered to fast to seeing it and break the fast, but they keep it to themselves. And that's rare. Nowadays, living in urban areas, we're not going to be able to see the moon unless it's very big. If you're living outside in the country, when it's clear, there's no light pollution, you will be able to see it. I remember a few years I've seen the moon, but it was easy. Everybody saw it. I never saw the moon when nobody can see it. So this is what they call اتفاق المطالع واختلاف المطالع. Whether the rising of the moon is universal or is it local. It's gonna make common sense. People in one locality should follow the same thing. Yeah, it might be different. People in North Africa are different from people in East Asia, but you have Indonesia and Malaysia close to one another. Do you think they should? But nowadays, political differences are dictating a lot of these things. You just follow the locality with. Sometimes you live in a country you don't trust the rulers. I remember in Syria when we were living, a lot of times we thought that whatever Saudi Arabia declares, they go against it because they are in disagreement. When they agree with it, they give them, I don't know, some money or something like this. Then they will fast with them, break fast with them. But you still have to fast and break fast with your country. Well, whether they're doing it rightly or wrongly, it's on their shoulders. Allah is the one you're dealing with. Allah is merciful. He's not going to omit your reward because you didn't exactly follow the moon with it. You did your best. The order for Muslims together, it's a collective worship. It has to be done together. It's like Salatul Jumu'ah. If somebody doing it at a time you don't agree with it, you cannot just go alone and do your own Jumu'ah for no reason, because I don't think they're doing it on the right time. I'm going to do it on my own. It's a collective worship. وفي حديث مشهور يسمى حديث كريب أن أم الفضل بنت الحارث بعثت كريب إلى معاوية بالشام. قال فقدمت الشام فقضيت حاجتها واستهل علي رمضان وأنا بالشام فرأيت الهلال ليلة الجمعة ثم قدمت المدينة في آخر الشهر فسألني عبد الله بن عباس رضي الله عنهما ثم ذكر الهلال فقال رأيتم الهلال؟ قال رأيناه ليلة الجمعة. قال أنت رأيت؟ فقلت نعم ورآه الناس وصاموا وصام معاوية. فقال لكن رأيناه ليلة السبت فلا نزال نصوم حتى نكمل 30 أو نراه. So this is a hadith. It happened at times of Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. He was the Khalifa. One of the Sahaba went to Sham, nowadays Syria, and Ramadan came. And they saw it on Friday night. That means Thursday they finished, early Friday night they saw it. And people started their fasting. By the time he reached back to Medina, almost a month, he came by the end of the month, it hasn't finished yet. Ibn Abbas was asking him, when did you all see the moon of Ramadan? He said Friday. He said here in Medina, we saw it Saturday. And we're going to continue what we're doing until we see the moon, the next moon, or we finish 30 days. So that means he considered Sham have their own way of seeing, and Hijaz, Medina, and Mecca have their own way of seeing it. So how are we going to combine this? So this is where the ulama, some of them said, this is ikhtilaf al-matali'. Two different areas, geographically big. One of it, there's another phone open. Maybe another phone is making echo. That they don't have to follow one another. But a lot of ulama says, if the knowledge of the new moon comes in a time that's applicable, you use it. So if they knew about it on Friday, that they saw it in Sham on Friday, they should have all the Muslim in all the countries have started fasting on Friday. But they did not have emails or any other way of conveying the message. It takes them a month to come there. To say by the time they reach it, they have no use for that information. So they stick what they have. It's different from nowadays, where the minute they see it in one country, everybody knows. So this is one way of sharing. This is why we understand about اختلاف المطالع. اتفاق المطالع واختلاف المطالع, that the rising of the moon are same or different. So all the ulama that I've seen them at the end agree on, you follow your locality. If you are the big leader, you try to unify the Muslims on one scene. If you're not the leader, then you follow whatever your locality is following. Even if you live in a country that works with calculation. If you're living in Turkey or other country that already they published it years ago, Ramadan starts this day, finish that day, and so on. You're living in this country, you have to follow it this way.
What about the people who, a lot of people these days, they actually say, Saudi Arabia is fasting, we're going to fast with them. They're breaking, isn't that wrong?
So,
Like singling out that one country.
for us, we're not making that decision, we follow. But the ones making...
The local people make that decision.
Yeah. The one people local decision, a lot of times they're trying to see how can we unify. I lived in this community from 30 years ago. I remember first we started following ISNA. ISNA used to do sighting of the moon. And we would wait until California have seen it, and sometimes till midnight until we announced next day, and we had a message somebody would call, tomorrow's Ramadan, was not Ramadan, and it was a big thing. And then ISNA changed, where they started using calculations, where they say they have put 3 categories. Definitely will be seen, definitely would not be seen, possibly can be seen. And when it's definitely will be seen, they don't care. You see it, you not, they don't look for anybody to testify. They already announced it. It's not going to be seen, you're not going to look. When it's possibly, they look for it. And then we say, well, this is not the Islamic way of doing it. Either you do it or not. So we start following Islam. And then we start, okay, we're going to follow any Muslim country anywhere in the world. So you start looking at the East, looking at Indonesia, Malaysia, and as you move so on. And I think, what do they call it? AJMA? AMJA. Yeah, so the American Muslim Jurist Association. So there are a lot of ulama and talabat ilm, they were following this matter once they announced it, we started announcing it. And again, it was very hassle. And at the end, most localities at the end they said, okay, we're going to be following Saudi Arabia. Everybody watching it on TV, they see Salat al-Taraweeh, they see everybody agreeing, and they start following it. I don't argue with it as long as people, because I lived in a time where different masjids were announcing Ramadan at a different time, and we're praying Eid 2 days, sometimes 3 different days. So keeping the unity of the local community is more important than the exact way of doing it. So that's why I'm not part of deciding how they do it, as long as they all agree in doing it, so we all fast together, break fast together. Allahu Akbar. إذا أغمي هلال شوال وأصبح الناس صياما. عن ابن عمير بن أنس بن مالك قال حدثني عمومتي من الأنصار من أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال أغمي علينا هلال شوال فأصبحنا صياما فجاء ركب من آخر النهار فشهدوا عند رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أنهم رأوا الهلال بالأمس فأمرهم رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أن يفطروا وأن يخرجوا إلى عيدهم من الغد. So, if you happen not to know, you always finish 30 days. The lunar month are either 29 days or 30 days. Out of the year, there are 4 months that are 30 days, and 8 months are 29. So it's more likely to be 29 than 30. A lot of the Sahaba said during the 8 years that fasting was ordered in Medina, they've done more 29 days than 30, and this is the calculation, more than 29 days than 30. So if it was cloudy, you couldn't see the moon, automatically it will complete to 30 days. How about middle of the day, somebody comes from another area that wasn't cloudy and told them we saw the moon. So you have to follow what they've done. So if you think that this is going to be the 30th day of Sha'ban, tomorrow, and because you couldn't see the moon, half day through, somebody comes, oh, yesterday we've seen the moon. You complete fasting that day, and then you make up another day for it. If it was Shawwal, what happened here, one of the Sahaba said, that they completed the 30th day of Ramadan, and while they were fasting, somebody came, oh, last night you've seen the new moon, that means today is Eid. So Rasulullah ordered them all to break their fast, but they missed Salat al-Eid, he said tomorrow we'll pray Eid. So if you have a knowledge afterwards that you can use, then you use it. But if it comes a day or two later, it's done. There's nothing you can do about it. هل يصوم أو يفطر من رأى الهلال وحده؟ اختلف العلماء في هذا، فمنهم من رأى إيجاب الصوم والفطر لمن انفرد برؤية الهلال استنادا إلى حديث صوموا لرؤيته وأفطروا لرؤيته، ومنهم من رأى أن لا يصوم ولا يفطر إلا مع الناس استنادا من قوله صلى الله عليه وسلم الصوم يوم تصومون والفطر يوم تفطرون والأضحى يوم تضحون. وعن مسروق قال دخلت على عائشة يوم عرفة فقالت اسقوا مسروقا سويقا وأكثروا حلواه، كأنها تعرض به أنه لم يكن صائما في عرفة، ومعظم الصحابة صائمين. قال فقلت إني لم يمنعني أن أصوم اليوم إلا أني خفت أن يكون يوم النحر. فقالت عائشة النحر يوم ينحر الناس والفطر يوم يفطر الناس. So he's saying about fasting alone or with the people, and we mentioned the two conflicting things. Is the obligation So the obligation is to, this is better. Follow the scene or you follow the people. So in one incident, Masruq, so he was one of the servants of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and his wife afterwards, Aisha. On the day of Arafah, the day before Eid al-Adha, it's highly recommended you fast. Not a must, it's mustahab. So he wasn't fasting. So Aisha tried to make fun of him. He said, give him sweet, something sweet and make it extra sweet for him. So he knew that she's making fun of him, but he's fasting, he's not. So the only reason I didn't fasting because I thought today might be the day of Eid. It's prohibited to fast the day of Eid. So Aisha told him the day of Eid al-Nahr, Eid al-Adha, is the day when everybody's doing it. And the day of Eid al-Fitr, end of Ramadan, when everybody's doing it. So it doesn't matter what you think. As long as the people doing it, then you have to follow what they're doing. قال الصنعاني في سبل السلام فيه دليل على أنه يعتبر في ثبوت العيد الموافقة للناس، وأن المتفرد بمعرفة يوم العيد بالرؤية يجب عليه موافقة غيره ويلزمه حكم في الصلاة والإفطار والأضحية. Imam San'ani had a book called Subul Salam. In it also one of these books of fiqh that he's following the dalil. When he mentioned this ahadith, his opinion was at the end that one should follow what people are doing. So even if somebody have seen Eid, he has to follow people and their salah and their udhiyah and their iftar and everything. وقال شيخنا الألباني رحمه الله: وهذا هو اللائق بالشريعة السمحة التي من غاياتها تجميع الناس وتوحيد صفوفهم وإبعادهم عن كل ما يفرق جمعهم من الآراء الفردية، فلا تعتبر الشريعة رأي الفرد ولو كان صوابا من وجهة نظر في عبادة جماعية كالصوم والتعييد وصلاة الجماعة. So here Sheikh Al-Albani also an opinion that one of the general purposes of Sharia bring people together. So if somebody, even on his own opinion that tomorrow is Eid or not Eid, he has to follow what the Jama'ah are doing. When there is a collective ibadah, like fasting, like Salatul Eid, Al-Udhiyah, he has to follow the group, regardless what his own personal feeling are. وقد بلغ الأمر ببعضهم في عدم الاعتداد بالرأي المخالف لرأي الإمام الأعظم في المجتمع الأكبر كمنى إلى حد ترك العمل برأيه إطلاقا في ذلك المجتمع فرارا مما قد ينتج عليه من الشر بسبب العمل برأيه. فروى أبو داود أن عثمان رضي الله عنه صلى بمنى 4. فقال عبد الله بن مسعود منكرا عليه: صليت مع النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم 2 ومع أبي بكر 2 ومع عمر 2 ومع عثمان صدرا من إمارته ثم أتمها ثم تفرقت بكم الطرق فوددت لو أن لي من 4 ركعات 2 متقبلتين. فلما قيل له: عبت على عثمان ثم صليت 4، قال: الخلاف شر. So this is about the importance of following the Jama'ah, not causing public discourse. Not only matters of Siyam, even the matters of general fiqh. If there's different opinions and you have, let's say, the Imam, the Khalifa, choosing one opinion and you yourself disagree with him, you have to follow that ijtihad. So they give in the example, when people are making salah in Hajj, when they go to Mina, they have to make qasr. That means that salah that's 4 rak'ah, they pray 2 rak'ah. And this is how Rasulullah have done it, Abu Bakr and Umar. And Uthman, part of his life, he done it 2. And part of his life, he prayed it 4. Some ulama say because he bought a house in Mecca, so he considered himself a dweller of Mecca rather than a traveler. But the sunnah was that Mina is outside al-Haram, so he should be following the sunnah of Rasulullah praying too. And he told Uthman ibn Mas'ud, he told Uthman, this is not the way, the correct way, what Rasulullah have done, Abu Bakr and Umar. But he himself, Ibn Mas'ud, whenever Uthman prayed it 4, he prayed 4 with him. And they asked him, you blame him and then you follow? He said, we have to follow. Al-khilafu shar. This agreement only brings evil. Because people will make that little fiqhi disagreement on a matter, start saying he's not fit for khilafah. They say he's disobeying the sunnah of Rasulullah ﷺ, and then they'll say he's a kafir, and that's one of the reasons that the Khawarij have used with other little things, and they killed him at the end because of it, and open a door of discourse and troubles till nowadays. Arkan al-Sawm. So what are the important things that we need to know about fasting? So there are pillars that without it, fasting is not considered valid. First of all, niyyah, intention. Like any ibadah, anytime you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you should have an intention of doing it. If your intention to do diet, to lose weight, and you spend the whole day not eating and fasting, this is not siyam. This is medical fasting, not religious fasting. You don't get the ajr for it. Now, if you get byproduct, you feel good, you lose weight, that's fine. But if your intention to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and start losing weight, yes, you get the ajr of siyam. But that should be your intention. It shouldn't be your intention, I'm just going to do it for medical reason. You have a lot of people do what the intermittent fasting, they fast 16 hours, they eat 8 hours. That's almost like Islamic fasting. The difference, the niyyah, and then the water part. They're allowed to drink water. In Islam, you don't eat or drink. The hadith in general, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Every action is tied to the intention behind it. So when is the niyyah? Best, the niyyah is done the night before you start. So at night time, say, I'm going to be fasting tomorrow. For Ramadan and Fard, anything that's an obligation, the niyyah should be established before you start it. For things that are permissible or encouraged, it can be delayed. So somebody will say, I'm going to see tomorrow how I am. I'm having a headache today. I'll wake up tomorrow. I'll see. By 7, 8 o'clock, headache is gone. I'm going to complete my fasting. Or I'm going to have a dental appointment tomorrow. If I'm going to go to the dentist, going to be draining my teeth, water going to come in, I'm not going to fast or not. Wait a little bit. For mustahab, they can delay the niyyah. For fard, the niyyah should be from there. And niyyah is something in the heart. You don't have to pronounce it with the mouth. There is no report of Rasulullah ﷺ in fasting or in salah. You see somebody in salah, it's time for Allahu Akbar, this time I have the niyyah of praying the salah for rak'ah of Isha with this imam towards Makkah on the madhab of so and so on. I've seen it. I've seen people saying it. This is not intention. Why are you here? To pray Isha. Why are you not at home? Because behind the imam. Okay, that's your niyyah. You don't have to announce it. And the same thing applies for Ramadan. Is your intention to fast every day of Ramadan? Yes, that's your niyyah. Done. You don't have every day, oh, at 9 o'clock tomorrow I'm going to be fasting, second day of Ramadan as a fard. You don't have to do that. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من لم يجمع الصيام قبل الفجر فلا صيام له. So whoever doesn't have an intention to have fasting before Fajr time, then fasting is not accounted. So this is for fard. Why are we saying this is fard? Because we know in tatawwu', when things are permissible, Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم has waited. عن عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت قال لي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ذات يوم يا عائشة هل عندكم شيء؟ قالت فقلت يا رسول الله ما عندنا شيء. قال فإني صائم. Once Rasulullah woke up, he asked his wife Aisha, do you have anything today? Do you have cooked anything? And if we say no, we don't. Say, okay, I'm going to fast today. So that means after Fajr, during the day, he decided to fast. He hasn't eaten anything, hasn't drank anything. So early in the day, he's not going to wait until 1 o'clock or 4 o'clock and decide, okay, I haven't eaten, it's half day has passed, I'm going to be fasting now. Early on in the day. قال شيخ رحمه الله قبل الزوال. قال النووي باب جواز صوم النافلة بنية من النهار قبل الزوال. So a lot of ulama say the intention for an optional fasting should be determined before noon time. Yeah. So as long early in the day, yes. Sometimes I'll do that. I'll wake up and I'll see, okay, I think I'm feeling okay. I have the intention to fast Monday, but the night before I wasn't feeling good. I'll see how the day goes on. 7, 8, 9 o'clock, okay, I'm good. I'm going to continue. You can break a fast any time. If it happens you felt sick or that dental appointment came. You apply, you're fasting, you don't know, the dentist will, and he called you, oh, we have an opening. Do you want to fix your teeth? Yes, it's been killing me. Then you break a fast and go. So this is the first thing. So niyyah, then the actions. What are the actions that you do? الإمساك عن المفطرات من طلوع الفجر إلى غروب الشمس. You stop from doing anything that break your fasting from dawn till sunset. And dawn is not sunrise. Dawn is the early break of light before sunrise. It's depends on the location, time of the year, an hour, hour and a half, it depends. وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَكُمُ الْخَيْطُ الْأَبْيَضُ مِنَ الْخَيْطِ الْأَسْوَدِ مِنَ الْفَجْرِ ثُمَّ أَتِمُّوا الصِّيَامَ إِلَى اللَّيْلِ. In Surah Al-Baqarah, the ayat that relates to fasting, one of it, the order that you can eat and drink at night time until the white line is clear from the dark line of dawn. Then you finish your fasting until night time. So the Shia use this hadith, ثُمَّ أَتِمُّوا الصِّيَامَ إِلَى اللَّيْلِ. They don't break their fast at sunset. They break their fast until it's fully dark. They say the Quran says until night time. When sunset, it's still light. Well, how do we know when it is night? We know from the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, whenever the sun sets, you cannot see it beyond the horizon, you break your fast. That's the night. So this is when a word like night can mean early in the night or deep in the night, can have different interpretation. The Sunnah of Rasulullah sallam explains the meaning of it. So linguistically, you can make it whatever you want. The words of Rasulullah sallam, his actions tells you the minute the sun sets, your fasting is broken. Whether you decide to break it or not is done. على من يجب الصيام يجب صوم رمضان على المسلم العاقل البالغ الصحيح المقيم وإذا كانت امرأة طاهرة من الحيض والنفاس. So who is obligated to fast Ramadan? First it has to be Muslim. Non-Muslim, the fasting for them is not going to be accepted. It has to be aqil, somebody with sane mind. Somebody who's insane, very sick, cannot comprehend, demented, anything, there's no obligation for him. Baligh has reached the age of puberty. So for the very young, they don't have to. If they're able, they encourage. If you have somebody 7, 8 years old want to fast, you encourage him to do that. But they're not obligated.
What's the difference between someone that's baligh and mumayyiz?
مميز قبل سن البلوغ. So he's saying, how about, what's the difference between somebody who reached the age of puberty and somebody who had reached the age of recognition? Recognition could happen earlier. You have people in 7 and 8 years old. They can sit, they can memorize Quran, they can understand the hadith, they learn fiqh and so on. So he's mumayyiz, like laysa baligh. And unfortunately, some people are baligh and not mumayyiz. But the general rule, mumayyiz usually refer to younger age. Because this comes to the age of prohibition for children to see the women not properly dressed. So for children that are very young, they do not understand the temptation, sexual matters, and so on. If they happen to walk on their mother with the revealing clothes or just scanty clothes and so on, there's no prohibition in that. But once they reach the age, they know that stuff. So even if they not reach the age of puberty, a woman should be dressed in a proper way in that situation. She doesn't have in front of her son to have hijab, but at the same time, she doesn't go in front of him with a bikini. So there's different rules for the dressing. So he's Muslim, he's reached the age of puberty, he's aqil, he's sane with his mind, he's healthy, because a sick person, there's no obligation for him to fast, and he's settling, he's not traveling. A traveler has a permission to break his fast. And if it is a woman, she's not a state in her period or a state of being postpartum. قال صلى الله عليه وسلم رفع القلم عن 3 عن النائب حتى يستيقظ وعن الصبي حتى يحتلم وعن المجنون حتى يعقل أخرجه أبو داود في صحيحه وغيره. So one of the hadith of Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم says that the pen is not written. That means there's no accounting on 3 kinds of people. A person who's asleep until he wakes up, a boy until he reaches the age of puberty, and an insane person until he gains his sanity back. So this is in religious matter. I remember, maybe it's Imam Shawkani or another alim is saying that doesn't take away their civil responsibility. So if a boy let's say he throw a rock on a cow and kill it, his father has to still pay compensation. Yes, he's not going to be punished for it, but if there is compensation still stands. The same thing for an insane person who burns a house. His family are responsible for compensation. But this is in front of Allah for sins. And then the same thing will apply for hudud. For a young person, if he doesn't know what he's doing and end up killing another person, he's not going to be killed for it. But if there's blood money to be paid, it still has to be compensated for it. فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. In Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah describing those who are sick or traveling, they make up for that missed days another day after Ramadan. So whatever they missed, being sick or traveling, they make it up later on. صيام الصبي عن الربيع بنت معوذ قالت أرسل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم غداة عاشوراء إلى قرى الأنصار من أصبح مفطرا فليتم بقية يومه ومن أصبح صائما فليصم. قالت فكنا نصومه بعد ونصوم صبياننا ونجعل لهم اللعبة من العهن فإذا بكى أحدهم على الطعام أعطيناه ذلك حتى يكون عند الإفطار. هذا لما كان قبل فرض صيام رمضان كان صيام عاشوراء واجبا، فلما فرض رمضان أصبح صيام عاشوراء مستحبا. For young children, you encourage them to fast, you don't obligate them to fast. In one hadith, one of the Sahabiya, he said, before Ramadan was obligated, Rasulullah made it an obligation to fast Ashura, the 9th day of Muharram. And he told people, because on that day, if you remember the hadith of Rasulullah, he used to fast it in Mecca. And people of Quraysh used to honor it. So when he came to Medina, he found the people of Medina fasting and the Jews fasting it. So he wondered, why are you fasting? And the Jews said, this is the day when Allah has saved Musa from Fir'aun, when he crossed the sea and the sea drowned Fir'aun. And Rasulullah said, we are more worthy of Musa than you. So he ordered the Sahaba to fast that day. So some of them were already fasting it, honoring it from the days before, and some did not. So he sent people telling them, whoever was fasting, let them continue fasting. Those who haven't started, let them finish the rest of the day of fasting. So they started, even their youngsters, telling them not to fast. And when they start crying, they're hungry, they made little dolls for them, stuffed with cotton, al-ahn wal-qutn. They stuffed it, so they play with it and distract them until time to break the fasting, and then they will eat it. But it's not an obligation on kids if they haven't reached the age of puberty to make the fasting. من يرخص لهم في الفطر وتجب عليهم الفدية. So what happens if you cannot fast? There are either you make up for that day if we're able to it, or there is an expiation where somebody can pay a compensation for the days that they missed. يرخص الفطر للشيخ الكبير والمرأة العجوز والمريض الذي لا يرجى برؤه وأصحاب الأعمال الشاقة الذين لا يجدون متسعا من الرزق غير ما يزاولونه من أعمال هؤلاء جميعا يرخص لهم في الفطر إذا كان الصيام يجهدهم ويشق عليهم مشقة شديدة في جميع فصول السنة. هذا من فقه السنة ووافقه عليه المؤلف. So, if a person can never make up for the days he missed, somebody who's chronically ill can never fast. Somebody very old, they can never fast. It's not like just this day or week. It's not a temporary illness. It's constant. Or somebody, their duty is so hard, they work in front of a furnace all day. There's no way they cannot not eat or drink. They will get dehydrated. And there's no time in the year at all where they can compensate for that day. Then they have to pay an expiation. They feed one hungry person, poor person, for every day they miss. So that means if somebody, let's say, work in a little bit hot situation, if Ramadan in the summer, he cannot fast, but if it's in the winter, he might be able to do it, then he will make for it in the winter. But if somebody's job is hard any time of the year, then he can't. Somebody who's cultivating the land, he works when it is in the summer, it's hard for him. But in the winter time, he doesn't have anything to do. He can make up for it. But those who can't, then they pay fidya. They feed one hungry person, one good meal for every day that they missed.
Chair?
No.
I have a question. So, unfortunately, I've heard, I have some friends in the medical field, and unfortunately, I don't know where you got this opinion from, but they claim that because they're working such an important job, saving lives, that if fasting would affect my job, then I would not fast. And technically, since it's my everyday job, then, you know.
I would tell them there are millions of people working in that field and fasting. So, but if somebody has a particular reason not to, some have a very brittle diabetes, if they missed the insulin shot, they didn't eat in time, and so on, they go into diabetic coma, and so on, they tried it a couple times, end up sick, then we'll say, okay, that's an exception. But saying all the time, rare. Yeah, this should be the exception, not the rule. سئل في مجموع الفتاوى لابن تيمية رحمه الله، سئل عن رجل كلما أراد أن يصوم أغمي عليه ويزبد ويخبط أو يخبط فيبقى أياما لا يفيق حتى يتهم أنه مجنون ولم يتحقق ذلك منه. قال الحمد لله إذا كان الصوم يوجب له مثل هذا المرض فإنه يفطر ويقضي، فإن كان هذا يصيب في أي وقت صام كان عاجزا عن الصيام فيطعم عن كل يوم مسكينا والله أعلم. So Ibn Taymiyyah, that's like 700 years ago, he was asked about a man. Every time he tries to fast, he's starting getting confused. He might pass out, might act like a crazy person, foaming, and so on. Every time he does it, what should he do? He said, if this is only certain time of the year, then he break his fast during that time and fast when it's convenient for him. We can do it. If he cannot do it any time of the year, then he doesn't fast. He feed one day for every day that he missed. So that means if Ramadan was 29 days, you have 29 meals to provide. If we're 30 days, you have to provide 30 meals. والحبلى والمرضع إذا لم تطيقا الصيام أو خافتا على أنفسهما أو أولادهما أفطرتا وعليهما الفدية ولا قضاء عليهما. So it comes to the matter of a woman who's pregnant or breastfeeding. There is a lot of اختلاف in madahib. And what do you do with it? So some will say if she missed a month, whenever she's able to make up for it, she'll make up for it. And some will say, well, at that time they didn't have contraception. So a woman will be pregnant, postpartum, breastfeeding, 2 years, pregnant, postpartum, breastfeeding another 2 years, and so she might go on 10, 20 years in that situation. She will never find a time. And at that time, the baby depended on the breastfeeding. They didn't have bottles. So if she get dehydrated, cannot provide milk for the baby, baby dies. So they have to do it. So in this case, Ibn Abbas said, then she had just fidya. She cannot compensate for it. Some ulama say she do compensation later on in her convenience, because not every woman this happened to them. At some point, she's not going to be pregnant or breastfeeding, and she can make up for it, but she just make the fidya at the time, and whenever she can make up for it, she makes up. So there are two opinions. Wallahu a'lam, since this is common among the women and might take long. So if a woman was pregnant, but not every woman cannot fast. A lot of women can fast, especially when the fasting is during the cool months of the year. She's only missing 9-10 hours of fasting, and middle of her pregnancy where everything is safe, she might be able to do it. Very early when she's throwing up or she's sick, she might not be able to do it. Or later on when she's close, where she needs to be eating every 2-3 hours where the baby keep developing, she might not be able to do it. So that will be different from one woman to another. But if she cannot do it, she has the option of just paying the fidya. Some madahib say she had to pay the fidya, and whenever she can make up for it, then she make up for it. And there is opinions of fuqaha both ways. The sheikh here, he follows the ijtihad of Sheikh al-Albani, where he says they just pay the fidya, they don't have to make up for that.
شيخ هل القضاء سنة بسنة أم مثلا هو ما استطاعش هاي السنة مرت عليه وجاء رمضان هل ينتظر يقضي مثلا السنتين مع بعض لما يستطيع أم هي بسنة بسنة؟
الأصل سنة بسنة، هذا الأصل. The way it should be, you compensate before next Ramadan. And we know from the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, she says, since all women get their period once a month, she will be missing like close to 7 days every year. And because Rasulullah is with her, she wouldn't fast optional fasting when he's around just in case he needed her, until it's time for Sha'ban, so she would compensate for it in Sha'ban. So she wouldn't wait until next Ramadan pass. She has to do it before Ramadan comes. من يرخص لهم في الفطر ويجب عليهم القضاء. So we talk about first category, they can break the fasting and they pay compensation, a meal. The second category, they can break the fast, but they have to make up for it. A traveler and a sick person who's temporarily sick and then he gets better. فمن كان منكم مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخرى. Whoever is sick or traveling, he make up for the same days in another time.
Sheikh, I'm sorry, just to clarify, so a woman on her period, she's not allowed to fast during Ramadan, and she has to make up for it after Ramadan.
Yes.
But a woman who's breastfeeding, she has the option to fast if she can?
Yes. Yeah. If she's إذا خافتا على أنفسهما. So only time she breaks her fasting, if she's afraid it's going to hurt her or the baby if she keeps up the fasting. So she does it. She doesn't even need to have the doctor telling her that if she knows herself. It is difficult. Sometimes when people come to a doctor and tell, doctor, can I fast or not? It's like, there are some cases clear. Yes, you have severe illness. You cannot do it. Somebody who had organ transplant, they have to take their rejection medicine on the clock. They cannot miss it. Or somebody who having dialysis, the days of dialysis, they cannot fast. They feel very sick and so on. Somebody's severe illness, they miss the insulin shot, they go into coma. But a lot of times, the illness is milder. They can manage to do it. If they are sedentary, not doing much, but if they're active, they're out there, they're walking, they're driving, they're working in the field, they're working something heavy, it might affect them. In this case, you see yourself, if you're not able to do it, you have an option to break your fast and make it up for it in the cooler month when it's shorter days, it not affect you. And if even you try that you couldn't do it, then you pay compensation for it. Because I know a lot of people will go to their doctors who are either non-Muslim or not religious, and they take the safe, no, don't fast. I'm not going to put it on me, something happens to you, I'll tell you medically, don't fast. It should be halfway, somewhere, where a doctor give him general things, and then a person knows himself. He tried fasting, whether he can do it or not. وعن أنس بن مالك أنه ضعف عن الصوم عامة فصنع جفنة ثريد ودعا 30 مسكينا فأشبعهم. Anas ibn Malik, as I said, he grew very old. He was like over 100 years old. So later on in his life, he couldn't fast. He was so sick. So one year he couldn't fast any day from Ramadan. So later on, he made a big meal. He invited 30 poor people to eat until they're full. And that was the compensation for him, 30 meals. So one time he invited 30 poor people. والصحيح الذي يخاف المرض بالصيام يفطر مثل المريض كذلك من غلبه الجوع والعطش فخاف الهلاك لزمه الفطر وإن كان صحيحا مقيما وعليه القضاء قال تعالى ولا تقتلوا أنفسكم إن الله كان بكم رحيما وقال تعالى ما جعل عليكم في الدين من حرج وإذا صام المريض وتحمل المشقة صح صومه إلا أنه يكره له ذلك لإعراضه عن الرخصة التي يحبها الله وقد يلحقه بذلك ضرر. So he's saying for somebody who's sick and he can be hurt from fasting, it's better for him to break his fast because Allah doesn't want us to hurt ourselves. Even if his fasting was correct, but it's something disliked because he did not want to use the permission that Allah has given him. Let's say somebody gets mild flu, if he a little bit headache, a little bit mild fever, he can carry on his work, he'll do it. Somebody is running high fever, he can barely walk, and he wants just to finish the day of fasting. He's not really making the worship, he's just sleeping around all day so he didn't break it. No, it's better for him to break it, take his Tylenol, drink some water, get stronger, and then fast another day when he's stronger and he can really feel that he's doing the worship rather than it's something to check the mark I fasted that day. وعن أبي سعيد الخدري رضي الله عنه قال غزونا مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ل16 مضت من رمضان فمنا من صام ومنا من أفطر فلم يعب الصائم على المفطر ولا المفطر على الصائم. When somebody is traveling, it's up to them. If they feel the strength to keep fasting, keep fasting. If they feel the strength, they don't feel the strength, or they choose not to fast, they can break. So it doesn't have to be difficult for them. Anybody that goes in traveling, he has the option to break his fasting. The question is, how long is the traveling distance? And this is a matter a lot of fuqaha has disagreement on. Some of them compared it to, I think, 80 miles, something like this, or 80 kilometers. But there's no specifics. Most of the fuqaha, the temporary fuqaha, have said it is a matter of common sense. Whatever people consider traveling is traveling rather than commuting. Sometimes you go from east end of Louisville to west end, might take you 2 hours from traffic, but it's not traveling. You're not a traveler, you're stuck in traffic. But you can go to Indianapolis and you say, I traveled to Indianapolis. That might be 2 hours. So if you go into Indianapolis, do something in Ramadan, you can break your fasting. You're stuck in traffic in Louisville, you're not going to be breaking your fasting. So something of that sort. Because some people say, okay, I can travel from here to Washington, D.C. in 2 hours. Why should I break my fasting? Say, this is rukhsa. It's up to you. If you feel that you want to break fasting, break it. If you have the strength to do it, do it. A lot of times a traveler is not only the distance, he has other things to do. You're going there for a purpose. You're buying, you're selling, you're checking something, you're renting, studying, attending a conference. You're doing something. You're not going there for fun. So I would discourage people from going tourism in Ramadan and missing the Ramadan for that purpose. So somebody decide, I want to visit the Great Wall of China in Ramadan. I mean, it is permissible, but it's not something I would encourage. Tourism by itself, just for the purpose of tourism, is a lot of waste of money and effort and so on. And people are exposed to a lot of things that are not decent, let's put it this way. So there's a lot of fitna that goes around it. But during the month of Ramadan, if you're traveling, you decide if you want to keep your fasting or break your fasting. I remember once I was traveling from Saudi Arabia to here. When you're flying west, the day is very long. You're going with the sun. I think it was like 20 hours or so. I got really tired. By the time we landed, I was to pass out. So going west, I will never fast. Going east, the day is shorter. So keep the fasting. I will not miss that one. So you try and see.
Question.
No.
So when you're traveling west, you know the fast is going to be so long you're going to eventually have to break it. Do you break your fast before even traveling, or do you wait till you're tired enough then break it?
No, anytime. Once you started your journey, you don't have to wait. It's up to you. You can break it anytime. It was reported that Anas radiallahu anhu, or another Sahabi, the minute they left Medina, break on fasting, they start eating and drinking because they're already out. So they didn't have to wait until they're tired.
So if someone is traveling, let's say at 12 p.m.,
Yeah.
you're not allowed to break their fast in the morning, or from like,
No, you can.
in the morning
No,
before.
you can. You know that you're traveling that day.
Yeah.
Unless you're not sure. Let's say you're on a waiting list that you might catch a plane or might not. You wait and find out, because if you're going to be missing the plane, then you're going to be finishing your fasting. But if you already had a confirmed ticket, yes, things can happen. Sometimes planes get canceled, but that's not the rule. Most of the time, you book the plane and so on. Because a lot of times, there is a lot of effort put into traveling. You're going to be waking up early, packing your stuff, picking it up, putting it. There's a lot of effort done. You need to be in your full strength to do that. Allahu Alam. You use your common sense. وعن أنس رضي الله عنه قال كنا مع النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في السفر فمنا الصائم ومنا المفطر قال فنزلنا منزلا في يوم حار أكثرنا ظلا صاحب الكساء ومنا من يتقي الشمس بيده يعني الظل قليل جدا صاحب الكساء هو اللي عنده الظل ما في شجر ما في أي شيء ومنا من يتقي الشمس بيده قال فسقط الصوام وقام المفطرون فضروا الأبنية وسقوا الركاب فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ذهب المفطرون اليوم بالأجر. Once they were traveling, the Sahaba, it was fasting time, was very hot, and when they stood for rest at midday, there was no shade, there was no trees, there was nothing. So the people who were fasting just collapsed. They couldn't do anything. The people who broke their fast, they one who set up the tents, those who took care of the animals and so on. So Rasulullah said, those who broke fast today are the ones who got all the reward. Because the ones who kept their fast and did nothing. So in this case, they better that everybody should have broken fast. But he didn't order them to break their fasting. وذكر أبا سعيد الخدري قال سافرنا مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إلى مكة ونحن صيام قال فنزلنا منزلا فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إنكم قد دنوتم من عدوكم والفطر أقوى لكم فكانت رخصة فمنا من صام ومنا من أفطر ثم نزل منزلا آخر فقال إنكم مصبحوا عدوكم والفطر أقوى لكم فأفطروا فكانت عزمة فأفطرنا قال لقد رأيتنا نصوم صلى الله مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بعد ذلك في السفر. So the day, the year of Al-Fatah when they conquered Mecca, it was a Ramadan when they were set to travel. So as they were going by, Rasulullah ﷺ told them, you're getting closer to your enemy. If you're not fasting, it will be stronger for you. He didn't order them. He just encouraged them. So some kept their fasting, some broke it. Next day, he told them, tomorrow morning, you're going to be attacking your enemy. Break your fast is stronger for you, so you all have to break the fast. So they broke the fast. So first time they gave him an option because it's still 2 days travel. Next day, it was the night before the attack. So you need to be full strength. And then he said, after that, we traveled with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and you see some will be fasting, some will not be fasting. وعن جابر رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم خرج عام الفتح إلى مكة في رمضان فصام حتى بلغ كراع الغميم فصام الناس ثم دعا بقدح من ماء فرفعه حتى نظر الناس إليه ثم شرب فقيل له بعد ذلك إن بعض الناس قد صام قال أولئك العصاة أولئك العصاة. So in that year, when he ordered them to break the fasting, he stood in front of them, he drank water to tell them he himself breaking the fasting. He was later on told, well, some people kept the fasting. They say, oh, these are the ones who disobeyed me, and repeated it twice. So inshallah, we'll stop here. The night is moving very fast. Inshallah, we'll cover the rest of the subjects in the next weeks. Subhanallah.